There are people who love deeply, but love from a distance. People who care fiercely, but never let anyone see the softness beneath their silence. People who crave connection so intensely it aches, yet the moment someone gets too close, they flinch, withdraw, or vanish behind a wall built long before adulthood. These are the people who learned, far too early, that needing others is dangerous. They don't say it out loud, they don't show it. They might even laugh it off. I'm just independent. I don't like bothering people. I can handle everything myself. But beneath this self-reliance is a fear so old, it feels like bone. A fear that whispers, if you need people, you will be disappointed. If you lean, they will move. If you depend, you will break. This video isn't about weakness. It's about psychological survival. It's about the people who've learned to stand alone, not because they wanted to, but because no one ever stood with them. There is a unique kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from believing that you must stay alone to feel safe. Psychologists sometimes describe this experience through attachment patterns, emotional neglect, and developmental trauma, but you don't need the technical terms to know the feeling. You've lived it. You know what it's like to want connection and simultaneously fear it. You know what it's like to crave closeness but instinctively push it away. You know the exhaustion of trying to convince yourself that you don't need anyone, that you're fine, that you're built for solitude. But here's the truth. No one is built to not need others. We learn it. We learn it in homes where vulnerability was punished. We learn it in families where emotions were dismissed. We learn it in childhoods where asking for help meant being ignored, shamed, or made to feel like a burden. We learn it in relationships where the people we relied on turned out to be inconsistent, unpredictable, or emotionally unavailable. And eventually, the lesson becomes internal. I must handle everything myself. Depending on others is not safe. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance you've spent years carrying this silent rule inside you. Maybe you've become the strong one, the responsible one, who doesn't let people see when you're hurting. Maybe you've built an entire identity around being capable, self-contained, impossible to disappoint, because you never give anyone the chance. But underneath that, independence is something tender, a quiet ache you rarely admit even to yourself. You might wonder why it feels so hard to open up, why compliments feel uncomfortable, why support feels suspicious, why closeness feels overwhelming, why you keep people at arm's length even when you want to let them in. You are not broken for feeling this way. You are not too much, or too cold, or too distant. You're experiencing the psychology of someone who fears needing others, someone who learned that vulnerability was dangerous, that relying on others led to pain, that love was something you had to earn, not something freely given. This video will help you understand where this fear comes from, how it shaped your inner world, how it shows up in your behavior, and how you can begin healing not by forcing yourself to need others, but by learning that it is finally safe to do so. Because your self-reliance is not a flaw, it is a story with roots, a story with meaning, a story that can be rewritten. It often begins long before you realize it, not in adulthood, not in your first heartbreak, but in the quiet, unspoken corners of childhood, when your nervous system was still learning what safety felt like, and your heart was still deciding what love meant. For some people, this fear develops in chaotic homes, where emotions were unpredictable. Maybe you grew up with parents who loved you, but their love had sharp edges, beautiful one moment, explosive the next. When affection and anger live in the same room, a child learns to tiptoe. They learn that closeness is a gamble, and needing someone is dangerous because you never know which version of them will show up. And so, you learned to keep a little distance, even from the people you adored. For others, it wasn't chaos, but absence. It's not loud neglect, quiet neglect. You learned early that your feelings didn't change anything, that your tears didn't bring comfort, that your needs didn't bring attention. You sat with emotions too big for your small hands, and no one came to help you hold them. Over time, you stopped reaching out, you stopped asking, you stopped hoping anyone would come. Some children grow up in homes where they become the caretaker instead of the cared for. Maybe you had a parent who confided in you, leaned on you, relied on you emotionally. You became their stability, their sounding board, their emotional anchor. You were too young to carry so much, but you carried it anyway. In psychology, this is called parentification, but in your body, it felt like responsibility. You learned that needing others was a luxury you weren't allowed to have because you were the one holding everything together. And then there are the subtler stories, the ones that Dante looked dramatic on the outside, but carved deep marks on the inside. Maybe you had a family that praised strength but frowned upon vulnerability. Maybe don't cry, don't be dramatic, handle it yourself, were phrases you heard often. You learned that independence was the only acceptable emotional currency, so you built a self that didn't ask, didn't need, didn't burden. Whatever the specifics, the pattern forms the same way. You learn that dependence leads to disappointment, that vulnerability invites pain, that closeness is unpredictable, that needing someone makes you weak, exposed, unsafe. And so your young mind, doing the best it can to protect you, creates a rule one that follows you all the way into adulthood. I'll rely on myself, only myself. No one can hurt me if I don't need them. This rule becomes your armor. At first, it feels like strength. You'll handle things alone. You'll solve problems quietly. You'll stay composed, controlled, self-contained. You're praised for it being mature, responsible, strong. But deep down, independence wasn't a choice. It was a survival strategy. You didn't grow into self-sufficiency naturally. You retreated into it. You built walls not because you wanted distance, but because closeness had once cost you too much. Then something else happens, something subtle, quiet, almost invisible. The world begins to mirror the story you learned in childhood. Because you don't ask for support, people assume you don't need it. Because you look strong, they forget you're human. Because you never show vulnerability, they think you feel no pain. And as this continues, the narrative tightens. See? This is why I don't need people. They don't show up. They never have. But the truth is, you never gave them a chance, because giving them a chance felt terrifying. It meant risking the wounds you worked so hard to avoid. By the time you reach adulthood, this pattern is ingrained not just emotionally, but physically. Your body tenses when someone gets too close. Your heart speeds up when someone offers help. Your mind rehearses every possible rejection before you even try to connect. You want closeness, but your survival brain still whispers, "Careful, don't need them. It's safer this way." That is the origin story, not a flaw, not a weakness. A childhood adaptation that stayed with you because no one taught you it was safe to let it go. But now, you're old enough to rewrite it. The fear of needing others is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself. It hides in the quiet choices you make every day, in the pauses you don't notice, in the ways you shrink or harden or disappear without realizing why. Here are the signs, perhaps the ones you've lived for years but never had a name for. Sign 1. You downplay your feelings before anyone else can. You might hear yourself saying, "It's fine," or "It's not a big deal," even when something is breaking inside you. You've learned to shrink your pain so it doesn't take up space, so nobody has the chance to dismiss it or worse, ignore it. You soften your hurt, the way people soften their footsteps in a room where someone is sleeping. Sign 2. You struggle to ask for help even when you desperately need it. For you, asking for help feels like standing on a cliff with no railing. It brings up fear, shame, tension in your chest. You rehearse the request 10 times in your head, and usually end up staying silent. You tell yourself, "I'll figure it out," even when you're drowning, because relying on others feels like an old danger your body still remembers. Sign 3. You crave closeness, but distance feels safer. You want connection deeply, quietly, achingly. But when someone gets close, your instinct isn't to lean in, it's to step back. You might ghost people you care about, withdraw after moments of intimacy, or suddenly feel overwhelmed by the very thing you longed for. It's like holding a flame you desire, but pulling away because you're afraid of being burned. Sign 4. You only show the strongest version of yourself. You've built an image, competent, calm, self-reliant. People call you the strong one, the reliable one, the one who has it all together. But that version of you is armor. A mask polished so well that even you sometimes forget it's not the whole truth. You don't showed the cracks, because you learned early that vulnerability didn't lead to comfort, it lead to pain. Sign 5. You feel guilty for having needs at all. You might feel like asking for anything. Support, affection makes you a burden. Emotions don't feel like natural human experiences. They feel like inconveniences you must hide. You've internalized the belief that you should handle everything on your own, and when you can't, a wave of guilt washes over you, whispering, "You're too much." Sign 6. You keep emotional scorn out of resentment, but out of fear you notice who shows up and who doesn't. You catalog every moment, not because you're petty, but because you are terrified of misjudging your safety. You're hyper-aware of inconsistency. If someone pulls away even slightly, your mind braces for abandonment, preparing you to retreat first. It's not vengeance, it's self-protection. Sign 7. You minimize your achievements to avoid attention. When people compliment you, you deflect. When someone is proud of you, you feel exposed. Letting others acknowledge your strength feels far more vulnerable than pretending it doesn't matter. Praise feels like a spotlight, and you'd rather stay in the shadows where no one can expect anything from you. Sign 8. You feel uncomfortable when someone genuinely cares, someone checking in on you, offering support. Saying they're worried about you, it should feel comforting, but it often feels threatening. Your instinct might be to retreat, close the door, tighten your chest. Genuine care feels unfamiliar, like touching something warm when you've spent your whole life in the cold. Sign 9. You'd rather suffer silently than risk disappointing someone. You might take on too much, work too hard, carry everything alone. You'd rather break under the weight of silence than fear the look in someone's eyes if you let them down. You don't trust yourself to need others, but even more quietly, you don't trust others to handle needing you. Sign 10. You confuse self-protection with independence. On the surface, you look self-sufficient. People admire your independence, your resilience, your ability to stand alone. But independence wasn't your preference, it was your shield. You learned to choose solitude not because it nourished you, but because connection once hurt you. And now, loneliness feels safer than intimacy. These signs aren't flaws, they're not failures. They are survival strategies your younger self built when the world felt unsafe, unpredictable, unforgiving. You don't avoid closeness because you don't want it. You avoid it because you learned that closeness once demanded a price you couldn't afford. And now, part of you still believes the cost is the same. But it isn't. Your life can hold a different story. The fear of needing others isn't simply a personality trait. It's not stubbornness. It's not emotional coldness. And it's certainly not a choice. There is real psychology behind it, research theory, and decades of understanding human development. What you're experiencing has roots. It has explanations. It makes sense. Parentification. When you become the caregiver too soon. Many people who fear needing others were parentified as children. Psychologists use this term to describe a role reversal when a child becomes the emotional caretaker, the problem solver, or the stabilizer in the home. Maybe you were the one calming a parent's emotions. Maybe you carried responsibilities meant for adults. Maybe you learned early that depending on others wasn't safe, because they depended on you. Research from multiple developmental psychology journals shows that children who are parentified often develop a core belief. My needs don't matter. Taking care of others is how I stay safe. This belief doesn't disappear in adulthood. It becomes the blueprint of your relationships. Hypervigilance. Living in constant readiness. Another concept often found in people with this fear is hypervigilance, a heightened sensitivity to emotional shifts, tone changes, or potential threats. You might constantly scan your environment without meaning to. You might notice when someone's mood changes before they say a word. You might feel uneasy when things feel too calm, too good, too stable. That's not paranoia. It's a nervous system trained in survival mode. Research on developmental trauma shows that children who grew up in unpredictable or emotionally unstable environments learn to stay alert as a defense. Your body learned. Stay ready. Stay small. Stay in control. And needing someone would mean letting your guard down, something your nervous system was never allowed to do. Attachment patterns. The avoidant blueprint attachment theory offers another piece of the puzzle. People who fear needing others often develop an avoidant attachment style. This forms when caregivers are emotionally distant, inconsistent, or overwhelmed, teaching the child that closeness isn't safe, comfort isn't reliable, and expressing needs leads to disappointment. Avoidant attachment doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you learn to hide what you feel. It's not that you don't want, Cliff's notes do, but your nervous system associates dependence with vulnerability, and vulnerability with danger. Another concept involved is emotional dysregulation, which doesn't mean you're bad with emotions. It means you were never taught, never shown how to safely experience, express, or receive emotional support. So your emotions live inside you like tides you manage alone. You fear needing others because you don't know what it feels like to let someone hold your emotions with gentleness. Psychologists also talk about two powerful frameworks: locus of control, the belief about what you can influence; learned helplessness, the exhaustion that comes from unmet needs. If you grew up believing you had to handle everything alone, you developed an internal locus of control, an intense pressure to control every detail, because letting others help felt unsafe. At the same time, repeated experiences of being let down or ignored can lead to learned helplessness. You stop trying to rely on others because history taught you it won't work. Your independence is not a preference, it's armor. There's also a quieter, more painful layer: compassion fatigue. People who were caretakers as children often become caretakers as adults. You empathize deeply. You absorb others' pain. You comfort, soothe, support while your own needs stay buried. Eventually, you burn out. Not because you don't care, but because you were never meant to carry so much alone. Parentification, hypervigilance, avoidant attachment, emotional dysregulation, learned helplessness, all of these concepts overlap to create one powerful message: I can't trust anyone with my needs. But here's the deeper truth psychology also shows us: these patterns can change. The brain is not fixed. Attachment styles are not prisons. Your nervous system can learn safety. You can learn to receive support just as much as you give it, and you deserve that. There's a part of this psychology that no one talks about, a truth that hides underneath the independence, the strength, the self-sufficiency. It tells the part of your story most people will never understand, not because you're dramatic or mysterious, but because you've spent your entire life making sure they don't see it. So let's speak that truth aloud. Let's name what this fear really feels like. When you're afraid of needing others, the world becomes a lonely place even when it's full of people. You become the person everyone relies on, but you have nowhere to fall. You become the comfort for others, but you have no place to collapse. You become the listener, the healer, the stable one, but your own wounds remain untouched, unseen, unhealed. People see your strength, but they never see the cost of it. It is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from living life alone. Even when you're surrounded by support, you can bring yourself to reach for. It's not the tiredness that sleep fixes. It's a bone-deep heaviness. The heaviness of holding everything together, managing every storm internally, never having a moment where you can simply fall apart. Carrying emotions that were never balanced by someone else's support, and this exhaustion grows quietly. You wake up tired. You go to bed tired. You smile, function, work, give, show up, and behind all of it is the silent weight of a life lived without a safety net. You can be independent, competent, admired, and still feel profoundly alone. You know what makes it harder? You don't even let yourself want connection. You don't admit you crave it. You shut down the longing before it reaches the surface. Because want makes you vulnerable. Longing makes you weak. Need makes you dependent. And dependence once meant disappointment. So you silence the ache before it has a chance to speak. You bury it under jokes, work, hobbies, busyness, anything that keeps the truth from rising. You're lonely. Not because people don't care about you, but because you don't believe you're allowed to need them. When you never learned to ask for help, to be held, to be cared for, you lose track of who you are outside of your usefulness. Your identity becomes tied to what you provide. I'm the strong one. I'm the reliable one. I'm the one who never breaks. I'm the one who manages everything. And it sounds noble. It looks admirable. People praise you for it. But what they don't know is that this identity was built in survival mode, not freedom. You don't know who you are without the armor. You don't know who you are when you're not performing strength. You don't know who you are when you're not holding everyone else together. And that confusion creates a quiet, painful emptiness. Relationships become complicated when you fear needing others. Every dynamic becomes a push and pull. You want closeness, but distance feels safer. You crave support, but receiving it makes you tense. You love deeply, but expressing it feels overwhelming. You admire vulnerability, but you can't practice it. You long for connection, but you fear the disappointment that might follow. So you end up in a painful pattern. You get close, then withdraw. You open up, then shut down. You love, but from behind a wall. And people may say, "You're hard to read," or "I never know what you're feeling." But the truth is, you know exactly what you're feeling. You just don't feel safe sharing it. There is a hollow feeling that sits inside you, a Quiet emptiness you can quiet put into words. It's not depression, it's not disinterest, it's not apathy. It's the emotional starvation that comes from living your entire life with your needs locked inside, untouched. Humans are wired for connection, for coagulation, for shared emotional spaces. And when you deny yourself those experiences, when you refuse to need others, your nervous system is left holding everything alone. That emptiness is the echo of emotional needs that were never met, never voiced, never allowed to exist. Independence becomes a cage, a beautiful one, an impressive one, a high-functioning one, but a cage nonetheless. You built it to protect yourself. It kept you safe when you needed protection. It helped you survive what you were never meant to endure. But now, the same walls that kept you safe are keeping you lonely. The same armor that protected you is keeping you untouched. The same independence that made you strong is keeping you invisible. And deep down, you know it. That's the hardest truth of all. But here's the part you've never been told. You can walk out of that cage, slowly, gently, on your terms, with compassion for the version of you who built it. You don't have to tear it down. You just have to open the door. You've spent years learning how to survive without reaching for anyone. Now this part is about learning how to live. Healing the fear of needing others isn't a single breakthrough moment. It is not a dramatic, cinematic transformation. It is a series of soft rebellions against the old story you inherited. It is choosing slowly, awkwardly, clumsily to let connection in. And healing begins with the truth most people avoid. You cannot heal the fear of needing people by continuing to do everything alone. You heal it by letting the smallest drops of connection touch the places inside you that have been dry for decades. So let's walk through the actual psychological steps. 1. Acknowledge the original wound. The fear of needing others didn't start yesterday. It didn't start with your last breakup, your last disappointment, or the last friend who vanished when you needed them most. It started with your first relationship, your blueprint, your childhood, when connection and danger lived in the same house. When safety and abandonment were unpredictable. When the people who were supposed to love you were the same people you had to protect yourself from emotionally. So you internalized the rule: need nothing, want nothing, expect nothing. Healing begins by saying, I see where this came from, and I don't shame myself for how I adapted. This is not self-blame. This is self-understanding. 2. Identify your protective behaviors. People who fear needing others often show the same behavioral patterns. You delay responding to messages because closeness feels threatening. You push people away before they have a chance to disappoint you. You keep conversations safe, surface level, controlled. You act strong even when you're falling apart inside. You numb your emotions when they get too close. You detach the moment someone gets too important. These behaviors are not flaws. They were survival strategies. But survival strategies turn into prisons when your life finally becomes safer and you don't know how to step out of the cage. Bring awareness to each habit gently. Name it without attacking yourself. Because the moment you can name the pattern, you no longer have to be ruled by it. 3. Practice micro-needing. You cannot go from self-isolated to deeply connected overnight. Your nervous system would revolt. It has spent too many years making sure that needing anyone feels like danger. So you start small, very small. Psychologists call this titration, gradual exposure. You begin by letting yourself need people in tiny, controlled, emotionally safe ways. Ask someone for a small favor. Let a friend know you had a rough day. Allow someone to comfort you without deflecting. Admit, once, that you don't have everything under control. Share one vulnerable sentence instead of your entire story. Each tiny step creates micro-proof that I can need someone in small doses and still be safe. These are the first cracks in the armor. Polarent is sit with the surge of anxiety. This part is hard. When you let someone matter even a little, your mind sends alarm signals. What if they leave? What if they laugh at you? What if they think you're weak? What if you become dependent and then everything collapses? This panic is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It is a sign you are doing something new. Your nervous system is reacting not to the present moment, but to the old danger. The healing practice is this: notice the fear, acknowledge it, and don't act on it. This is where emotional muscles are built. 5. Build relationships with emotionally consistent people. Your fear of needing others didn't come from healthy people. It came from unpredictable, inconsistent, emotionally unavailable people, so you must choose differently now. Healing becomes easier when you surround yourself with people who are consistent, responsive, emotionally aware, respectful of boundaries, not threatened by your independence, not intimidated by your vulnerability. These relationships reteach your nervous system how safety feels. You don't heal in isolation. You heal in new, healthier connections that don't resemble the old ones. 6. Let people see the real you. Gradually, the more you let someone see you, your fears, your softness, your sorrow, the more your brain learns that vulnerability is not a threat. You don't need to pour your soul out on the table. Just enough to contradict the old story. People can't be trusted. Becomes some people can. If they know the real me, they'll leave. Becomes if they know pieces of me, they might stay. This is where the fear begins to dissolve. Not quickly, not dramatically, but undeniably. 7. Rewrite the meaning of need. You were taught that needing people is weakness. But here is the truth you must relearn. Needing others is part of being human. It is not a flaw. It is not a failure. It is not a danger signal. It is connection. It is life. Strong people need others. Healthy people need others. Secure people need others. The goal is not to become dependent. The goal is to become interdependent. Connected but not controlled. Open but not consumed. Available but still whole. 8. Forgive yourself for the years you closed off. You weren't wrong for protecting yourself. You weren't wrong for surviving in the only way you knew. You weren't wrong for building emotional walls when you had no safe place to collapse. Forgive yourself for all the times you pushed love away. Forgive yourself for all the moments you pretended you were fine. Forgive yourself for the silence you chose instead of vulnerability. You were surviving, and now you are learning to live. Healing the fear of needing others isn't about becoming fearless. It's about becoming brave enough to try again. If this video resonated with you, know this. You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were a child who needed care, guidance, protection, and love. Instead, you learned to care for everyone else while hiding your own wounds. You built walls. You armored your heart. You mastered independence because you had to. That armor kept you safe. It saved you. It allowed you to survive. But survival was never meant to be permanent. And now, here you are, an adult, with a chance to live differently. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to let someone see the parts of you you've hidden. You are allowed to ask for help without fear. You are allowed to lean without guilt, to need without shame, and to be human without apology. Healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It doesn't mean pretending it never hurt. It means recognizing the strength it took to survive, while gently reclaiming what was never given to you. Safety, support, compassion, and care. You deserve relationships where your needs are met. You deserve tenderness. You deserve intimacy that doesn't threaten your sense of safety. You deserve emotional reciprocity, not constant self. Take small steps. Let people in slowly. Practice micro-needing. Learn to sit with anxiety and watch it soften over time. Choose your circle with care. Let them witness your vulnerability, even if it feels terrifying. These are not failures, they are proofs of courage, evidence that your inner child is finally being heard. Every moment you allow yourself to need someone, every time you lean even slightly, you are rewriting the narrative that was once imposed on you. You are teaching your nervous system, your heart, and your mind that closeness can be safe. You are showing yourself, finally, that dependence can coexist with strength, that intimacy can exist without danger, that needing someone does not make you weak. And here's the most important truth. You are not the child who had to survive alone anymore. You are not bound to the rules that once protected you. You are an adult with choices. And one of those choices is to finally give yourself what you were never allowed. Permission to be human, to be vulnerable, to be held instead of always holding. You can be fragile without being abandoned. You can be tender without being judged. You can let someone in without losing yourself. Your past shaped you. Yes, but it does not define your future. The fear you carry is real, but it is not unchangeable. The walls you built were necessary once, but now you can lower them at your own pace, gently, safely, intentionally. So take a breath. Feel the weight of your survival melt slightly. Recognize the courage it has taken to get here. Honor the person you were forced to be, and honor the person you are choosing to become. Because the truth is, you never had a childhood that offered safety. You never had the support you needed. You never had the permission to be weak, to need, to fall, to lean. to be held. But now, you have a future. And in this future, you can give yourself what was always yours to begin with: the permission to be human, the permission to feel, the permission to need, the permission to be loved. And that is not only possible, it is waiting for you. Slowly, gently, one small step at a time, you can rewrite your story. You are allowed. You are safe. You are enough. And this time, the story belongs to you.